Jennifer Lopez came to the live broadcast that day full of confidence, but one single question from Megyn Kelly completely destroyed her. America's toughest journalist forced the pop icon to flee in tears. The Megyn Kelly Today studio gleamed under its signature bright lighting as crew members made final adjustments for what was scheduled to be another high-profile celebrity interview. The sleek, modern set with its bold blue and white color scheme had become synonymous with hard-hitting journalism and uncompromising questions since Megyn Kelly's transition from Fox News to network television. Today, however, would test that reputation in ways no one in the building could have anticipated. Megyn Kelly sat at her iconic desk, methodically reviewing her research notes with the focused intensity that had made her one of America's most formidable television journalists. Her transition from cable news to morning television hadn't dulled her investigative instincts or her willingness to ask the questions that other hosts avoided. If anything, the broader platform had given her an opportunity to apply those same rigorous standards to a wider range of public figures. Her preparation for today's interview had been exhaustive. Folders of documentation lay organized across her desk, financial records, legal documents, timeline analyses, and a detailed breakdown of contradictory public statements spanning over 2 decades. This wasn't going to be another celebrity puff piece designed to promote the latest project. This was going to be journalism in its purest form. The production team moved with the efficiency that had become their trademark, but there was an underlying tension in the air that experienced television professionals learned to recognize. Word had leaked that today's interview might venture into territory that Jennifer Lopez's team had specifically requested to avoid, and everyone understood that such moments could either create compelling television or complete disaster. At exactly 10:30 a.m., a convoy of 3 black SUVs with heavily tinted windows pulled up to the NBC studios at 30 Rockefeller Plaza. Jennifer Lopez emerged from the middle vehicle wearing a stunning white blazer over a silk camisole, her appearance flawlessly calculated to project both power and femininity. Her entourage was extensive: publicists, security personnel, assistants, and what appeared to be a legal representative, suggesting that this wasn't just another promotional appearance. Her smile was radiant as she waved to the crowd of fans who had gathered despite the early hour, but those who knew her well might have noticed a slight tension in her shoulders that suggested she wasn't entirely comfortable with her decision to appear on a show known for its unpredictable questioning style. The decision to book this interview had been contentious within her team, with several advisors warning against the risks of facing a journalist with Megyn Kelly's reputation. The green room provided a temporary sanctuary from the controlled chaos of network television production. Jennifer sat in a plush leather chair, sipping green tea while her team bustled around her with last-minute preparations. They had spent weeks preparing for this appearance, crafting responses to potential difficult questions and developing strategies to redirect conversations toward safer topics like her latest business ventures and philanthropic work. 10 minutes to air, a production assistant announced, and Jennifer felt that familiar mixture of excitement and apprehension that accompanied high-stakes television appearances. She had done thousands of interviews over her career, but morning network television was different from entertainment shows or late-night appearances. The audience was broader, more diverse, and potentially less forgiving of evasive answers or obvious spin. Her phone buzzed with encouraging messages from her inner circle, each reminding her to stay focused on her talking points and avoid getting drawn into controversial topics. The messages brought a confident smile to her face, reinforcing her belief that her media experience and natural charisma would carry her through any challenging moments that might arise. The walk from the green room to the studio felt longer than usual, perhaps because she was acutely aware that she was entering the domain of one of television's most skilled interrogators. The corridors of NBC carried an atmosphere of serious journalism rather than entertainment, and the staff members she encountered seemed more focused on news gathering than on making guests feel comfortable. Megyn Kelly stood to greet her as she entered the studio, her handshake firm and her smile professional but notably lacking the excessive warmth that Jennifer had grown accustomed to from entertainment-focused hosts. "Jennifer, thank you for being here today. I'm really looking forward to our conversation." "Thank you for having me, Megyn," Jennifer replied, her voice carrying that distinctive blend of Bronx authenticity and Hollywood polish that had become her trademark. "I'm excited to be here." The pre-interview interaction was notably brief compared to Jennifer's usual television experiences. Instead of extended small talk and ego-stroking compliments, Megyn moved efficiently through the necessary technical preparations while maintaining a professional distance that immediately activated Jennifer's performance instincts. 2 minutes to live, the floor director announced, and everyone took their positions. Jennifer settled into the guest chair with practiced confidence, crossing her legs and adjusting her blazer in a way that projected both authority and accessibility. Her latest album sat prominently on the coffee table between them, though something about Megyn's glances suggested it might not remain the focus of conversation for long. The red recording lights blinked on, and suddenly they were broadcasting live to millions of homes across America. "Good morning, and welcome to Megyn Kelly Today," Megyn began with her characteristic authority and directness. "I'm joined this morning by Jennifer Lopez, the multi-talented superstar who continues to dominate music, film, and business. Jennifer, welcome to the show." "Good morning, Megyn. Thank you so much for having me," Jennifer replied, her smile bright and camera-ready. "It's wonderful to be here talking about all the exciting projects I have coming up." Megyn leaned forward with what appeared to be genuine interest. "You've had an incredible career spanning over 2 decades. Your new album explores themes of empowerment and authenticity. Those must be concepts that resonate deeply with your personal journey." It was a reasonable opening question, and Jennifer launched into a well-rehearsed response about artistic growth, personal evolution, and the importance of staying true to oneself. Her answers were polished and emotionally engaging, hitting all the expected notes about inspiration and creative fulfillment. For the first 8 minutes, everything proceeded within normal parameters for a celebrity interview. Megyn asked about the creative process, upcoming tour dates, and business ventures, allowing Jennifer to present herself as a hardworking artist and entrepreneur. Jennifer began to relax, feeling that perhaps Megyn's reputation for tough questioning had been overblown. But then Megyn's demeanor shifted in a way that was subtle yet unmistakable to anyone familiar with her journalistic style. Her posture straightened slightly, and her tone took on the focused intensity that had made her reputation during her years at Fox News. "Jennifer," she said, setting down her prepared questions and looking directly at her guest, "you talk a lot about authenticity and staying true to yourself. But I want to ask you about something that many people have found troubling about your public persona over the years." The slight change in approach immediately activated Jennifer's defensive systems, though she maintained her composed exterior. "Of course, Megyn. What's on your mind?" Megyn leaned forward, her eyes taking on the laser focus that had intimidated politicians and CEOs alike. "You've built your brand around this image of being a regular girl from the Bronx who made it big through hard work and determination. But the reality is quite different, isn't it? Your family was middle class, you had professional training, and you've had significant financial and industry support throughout your career. Why perpetuate a narrative that isn't entirely accurate?" The question landed with surgical precision, and Jennifer's carefully maintained composure flickered for just a moment before her media training kicked in. "I think there's a difference between acknowledging privilege and forgetting where you come from, Megyn. I've always been honest about my journey. But have you?" Megyn pressed, her voice carrying the relentless quality that had made her one of television's most effective interviewers. "Because when you say you're Jenny from the block, when you talk about struggling and having nothing, that's not really accurate, is it? You've created a working-class mythology around yourself that doesn't align with the documented facts of your upbringing and early career." Jennifer's hands, which had been resting casually in her lap, began to fidget with her jewelry, a tell that experienced interviewers learned to recognize as a sign of increasing stress. "I think you're oversimplifying a very complex situation. Yes, I had certain advantages, but that doesn't mean the journey wasn't difficult." Megyn's expression remained professionally neutral, but her follow-up questions grew more pointed. "Let's talk about some specific examples. You've claimed in interviews that you started with nothing, but records show you were enrolled in expensive dance and acting classes from a young age. You've talked about struggling to pay rent, but you were living in a Manhattan apartment that cost more than most people's annual salaries. Don't you think that's misleading to your fans who actually did come from poverty?" The directness of the question struck Jennifer like a series of body blows. Her voice carried a defensive edge as she responded. "Those are private details about my life that you're taking out of context to create a narrative that serves your purposes." "I'm not creating any narrative," Megyn replied with the steady authority that had made her a trusted figure in journalism. "I'm simply comparing your public statements with documented facts. If pointing out those discrepancies constitutes creating a narrative, perhaps the problem isn't with the questions but with the answers." Jennifer's breathing had become noticeably more shallow, and her voice rose just enough to be noticeable to viewers. "You're twisting my words and trying to make me sound like some kind of fraud when all I've ever done is work hard and try to inspire people." Megyn leaned back slightly, studying Jennifer with the same intensity she had once used to analyze political figures during presidential debates. But that's exactly what I'm trying to understand. How is perpetuating a false narrative about your background inspiring to people? Shouldn't inspiration come from honesty rather than manufactured relatability? I have been honest. Jennifer's voice cracked slightly with emotion. Just because I had some advantages doesn't mean I didn't work hard or face real challenges. Of course you worked hard, Megyn acknowledged. No one's questioning your work ethic. But there's a difference between working hard from a position of advantage and working hard from actual poverty. When you blur those lines, aren't you essentially appropriating the struggles of people who actually lived them? The word appropriating hit Jennifer like a slap across the face. Her composure cracked visibly as she leaned forward aggressively. How dare you suggest that I'm appropriating anything? I lived my life. I know what I went through. Megyn didn't flinch at Jennifer's aggressive posture. If anything, the emotional response seemed to confirm her suspicions about the authenticity of her guest's narrative. But that's just it. What you went through isn't what you've been telling people you went through. The struggling, broke girl from the Bronx story is compelling, but it's not accurate. Jennifer's eyes began to fill with tears of rage and humiliation. You don't know anything about my life. You don't know what it was like growing up in my neighborhood, dealing with the pressures I faced. You're right, I don't, Megyn replied with devastating calm. But I do know what the public records show. I know what your former neighbors and classmates have said. And I know that the person you're describing isn't the same person who's documented in those sources. Something inside Jennifer began to unravel. Her voice rose to nearly a shout as she responded. Public records? Former neighbors? You've been investigating me like I'm some kind of criminal? I've been doing my job, Megyn replied with the steady professionalism that had defined her career. When someone builds their entire brand around a particular narrative, that narrative becomes newsworthy. And when that narrative contains significant inaccuracies, it becomes our responsibility to address them. Jennifer shot to her feet so violently that her chair rocked backward, her face flushed with rage and humiliation. This is unbelievable. I came here to talk about my music, my art, my positive message, and you're attacking me with lies and distortions. Megyn remained seated, looking up at Jennifer with an expression of calm professionalism that somehow made her emotional breakdown appear even more dramatic. I'm not attacking you with lies, Jennifer. I'm confronting you with facts that you've been avoiding for years. Facts. Jennifer's voice had risen to a near shriek. These aren't facts, these are carefully selected pieces of information taken out of context to make me look bad. Then provide the context, Megyn challenged. Explain how the documented evidence of your middle-class upbringing and professional training aligns with your claims of starting with nothing. Help us understand how both things can be true. The challenge hung in the air like a trap that Jennifer couldn't escape. Her breathing became labored as she struggled to formulate a response that wouldn't contradict her carefully crafted public image. I don't have to explain anything to you, she finally managed, her voice breaking with emotion. I don't have to justify my life story to someone who's clearly determined to tear me down. Megyn's expression showed what might have been genuine concern. This isn't about tearing you down, Jennifer. It's about understanding why someone would need to embellish their background when their actual story of success is already inspiring. Embellish? Jennifer grabbed her purse from the floor beside her chair, her movements jerky and uncoordinated in her emotional state. I haven't embellished anything. Everything I've said about my life is true. But which version of your life? Megyn asked with the precision of a surgeon. The version where you struggled in poverty, or the version documented in public records? Because both can't be equally accurate. As Jennifer turned to flee, Megyn delivered what would become the most quoted line of the entire interview. Jennifer, she called out, her voice carrying the authority that had made her one of America's most respected journalists. Running away from difficult questions doesn't make them go away. And if your story can't withstand basic fact-checking, maybe it's time to consider whether it's worth telling. Jennifer stopped dead in her tracks, her entire body trembling with barely contained fury. For a moment, it looked like she might turn around and physically confront Megyn. Instead, she pressed her hand to her mouth to stifle what sounded like a sob and ran toward the exit. Her heels clicked frantically against the studio floor as she fled, the sound amplifying in the sudden silence that had fallen over the entire space. The cameras followed her until she disappeared through the stage door, leaving behind a quiet so complete that even the production crew seemed to have stopped their usual activities. For several long moments, nobody moved. Megyn sat calmly at her desk, straightening her papers with the composure of someone who had just completed a difficult but necessary job. Her expression showed no satisfaction, only the professional resolve of a journalist who had asked the questions that needed to be asked. Finally, Megyn turned to face the camera with the authority that had made her a trusted figure in American journalism. When we come back, we'll be discussing the importance of media literacy and why audiences deserve honest narratives from public figures. As the show cut to commercial, the production team scrambled to process what had just occurred. Social media was already exploding with clips and commentary, and entertainment news outlets were beginning to cover the story. The interview would be dissected and analyzed for weeks, with media experts debating whether Megyn had gone too far or simply done her job. Meanwhile, somewhere in the NBC building, Jennifer Lopez was probably in a bathroom, trying to repair her makeup and compose herself enough to face the inevitable photographers waiting outside. Her extensive team was likely coordinating an emergency exit strategy while fielding frantic calls from concerned business partners and attempting to craft some kind of damage control narrative. But the damage was irreversible. In less than 20 minutes, one of America's most skilled journalists had systematically exposed the contradictions in a carefully crafted public persona that had been decades in the making. She had done it with the same rigorous standards she had applied to politicians and world leaders, treating entertainment figures with the same expectation of accountability. Whether you agreed with her methods or not, one thing was undeniable. Megyn Kelly had demonstrated that celebrity status doesn't exempt anyone from journalistic scrutiny. Her refusal to accept manufactured narratives had created a moment of television that would be remembered as a watershed moment in celebrity journalism. The truth, as Megyn had suggested, doesn't disappear simply because it's inconvenient. And sometimes, the most important service a journalist can provide is forcing public figures to confront the gap between their carefully crafted images and documented reality. In those 20 minutes, American television had witnessed the complete deconstruction of a modern celebrity's attempt to control public perception through strategic myth-making. The architect of that deconstruction had been a fearless journalist who understood that accountability doesn't recognize fame, wealth, or cultural influence.